Desperate measures. The Prime Minister announces the strictest coronavirus controls yet.
We know that the virus cannot be absolutely stopped. Of course not. No one can do that. But we can slow the spread.
The global response is becoming more extreme, with a growing number of nations enforcing lockdowns and curfews. Chaotic scenes at US airports as Donald Trump expands the country's travel ban. And Britain under fire over its more relaxed response, with the death toll doubling overnight.
This is SBS World News with Janice Petersen.
Good evening. The federal government is dramatically stepping up its response to the coronavirus, enforcing strict border control measures, the most extreme we've seen on our shores since the outbreak began. As of midnight tonight, all travellers from overseas, including returning citizens, must go into mandatory self-quarantine for 14 days. Cruise ships from foreign ports are now banned for at least 30 days. Authorities are now advising against handshakes, but schools will still open their doors tomorrow morning.
As cities and nations around the globe go into lockdown, back home, the Prime Minister...
Good afternoon, everyone.
...forced to adopt extreme measures here too.
All people coming to Australia will be required, I stress, to self-isolate for 14 days.
It will affect passengers arriving from midnight tonight. International cruise ships will also be banned from docking at the country's ports for an initial 30 days, a decision made in a new national cabinet to deal with the coronavirus.
We know that the virus cannot be absolutely stopped. Of course not. No one can do that. But we can slow the spread. Slowing the spread, you free up the bed.
This is a proportionate response.
It's a move the federal opposition supports.
We must do everything possible to stop this virus taking hold in Australia.
It'll be up to the states and territories to ensure returning travellers are taking the right steps. The New South Wales Premier warning the police could become involved for those breaking the rules.
There are provisions for us to be able to enforce it, but we would much prefer that people supported us by putting themselves in self-isolation.
Schools not directly affected by the virus will remain open. Some in New South Wales have taken their own precautions, with assemblies and excursions to be cancelled from tomorrow. The general public are being advised to practice more social distancing.
We're going to have to get used to some more changes in the way we live our lives.
And just hours after Australians were told this gesture was low risk, the Prime Minister has provided some clarity.
So there's no more handshakes. That is a new move we've moved to.
Nakari Thorpe, SBS World News.
Well, let's take a look at how the outbreak is spreading here. There are nearly 300 cases across Australia. New South Wales remains the worst affected state. Another 22 people were diagnosed overnight, and there are now 61 confirmed infections in Queensland. Well, for more on the Prime Minister's announcement, let's go live now to SBS reporter Lucy Murray at Sydney Harbour. Lucy, how will these beefed up border measures impact travellers?
Good evening. Well, the effect on the tourism industry is expected to be significant. But those in the cruise industry, this shouldn't come as too much of a shock. Major players such as PMO and Princess Cruises had already cancelled upcoming trips. The other significant measure announced today is that compulsory 14-day quarantine for people arriving from overseas. The exception is Pacific Islanders, who will be allowed to transit through the country to return home. After the announcement, Qantas put out a statement saying it'll allow passengers to cancel international and domestic trips and retain the value as a travel credit. Now, these measures announced today are unlikely to be the last. The Prime Minister today foreshadowing more restrictions to be implemented in a staged approach, including limits on visits to aged care facilities. Another announcement is expected on Wednesday. Janice?
Thanks, that's Lucy Murray live from Sydney Harbour. Well, New Zealand, which introduced similar measures yesterday, now has 8 cases of COVID-19. 2 more people tested positive to the virus today, including an Australian who flew to New Zealand despite waiting on test results for the coronavirus from Queensland officials. The man had no symptoms at the time and is now in self-isolation. He was recently in France.
Well, short of asking every person, have you been tested and are awaiting a test result, I don't think that's feasible. I think what this does reiterate is the importance of every single person playing their role and showing responsibility. At worst, this action has inconvenienced a number of people. I guess at best, at worst, it may well have put people at risk.
A cruise ship is being held in Akaroa Harbour in New Zealand with at least one suspected case of COVID-19 on board. The person's test results are due tomorrow. The pandemic is testing the resolve of countries across the globe as health officials and governments scramble to deal with the spread of the virus. Cases are climbing in the world's 4th most populous country, Indonesia, leading to the closure of all schools in Jakarta for 2 weeks. A nighttime curfew in densely populated Manila has been imposed, while Latin America is also ratcheting up its response. Colombia is closing the nation's border with Venezuela to try and curb the spread. With the virus epicentre now in Europe, cases of COVID-19 have been rapidly expanding there. Spain, the continent's worst hit country after Italy, has enforced a partial lockdown.
The coronavirus is tonight emptying the streets of Europe of all signs of normal life. Spain is following Italy's grim lead and slowly closing down. People can't leave their homes unless it's to go to work, buy essential items or if it's an emergency.
En definitiva, esas son las actividades cotidianas que vamos a poder hacer y que van a justificar el que se pueda hacer uso de ese espacio público.
Some Spaniards taking to their balconies to applaud health workers on the front lines of the crisis. France is also calling last drinks on social gatherings. All non-essential shops, restaurants and bars will close.
Qu'est-ce qu'on va faire pendant ce premier jour? Mais boire où? Boire où? C'est un vrai problème, on va pas rester chez nous tout seul. C'est une tristesse. C'est une tristesse.
The French Prime Minister said the growing numbers of people in intensive care can't be ignored. Italy's grief, a sobering reminder of the need to take the outbreak seriously. As the death toll there surpasses 1,400, the obituary notices in the paper are running far longer than usual. At a hospital in Rome, doctors who helped with the outbreak in China are visiting to advise and support.
We believe that our colleagues in Italy have done a very good job.
The virus is breeding fear and paranoia in other parts of the world. Israel has joined Iran and China in approving the use of cyber measures to track patients' phones, measures usually reserved for counter-terrorism.
בתוך הציבור האזרחי, אבל אין ברירה. אנחנו נאבקים עכשיו במלחמה שהיא מחייבת אותנו לנקוט באמצעים מיוחדים.
A war mentality was evident on the streets of Manila too, where thousands of Philippine police, backed by the Army and Coast Guard, started sealing the capital from domestic travellers. Despite mounting cancellations and travel restrictions, the Japanese Prime Minister says the Tokyo Olympics will go ahead in July.
Young and old coming together in a community of astounding diversity.
As survival instincts kick in, the official motto of the Games, united by emotion, could become more relevant than ever. Hannah Sinclair, SBS World News.
The United States has expanded its European coronavirus travel ban to include the United Kingdom and Ireland. The new rules bring the total number of banned European countries to 28 and come as the outbreak in the United States accelerates.
The United States ramping up the nation's partial shutdown, expanding its 30-day travel ban.
The President has made a decision to suspend all travel to the United Kingdom and Ireland effective midnight Monday night.
US citizens and legal residents still able to return through 13 designated airports. Long lines at Chicago's O'Hare showing what's in store for them. Travellers shoulder to shoulder, temperature checks taking up to 6 hours. In Washington, President Trump advising against domestic travel.
Well, if you don't have to travel, I wouldn't do it. If you don't have to travel, we want this thing to end.
For many authorities, it's just beginning. In the past 24-hour period, Oregon, Virginia, Louisiana and New York states reporting their first fatalities.
The first New Yorker to die related to coronavirus. This is a very painful moment. This is a moment we all knew would come, but that doesn't make it any easier.
New York now the nation's coronavirus epicenter.
This virus, the coronavirus, well, it may not look evil, but it's evil. And it's causing huge amounts of sickness, worry, and economic hardship.
Also confusion. Yesterday, President Trump and his team promised a nationwide website to handle testing locations, lauding work being done by Google.
It's going to be very quickly done. Google has 1,700 engineers working on this right now. They've made tremendous progress.
But just 90 minutes later, Google tweeted that its sister company, Verily, is in the early stages of testing a rollout for the Bay Area of San Francisco. Today, Mike Pence put off providing clarity.
Tomorrow, 5 o'clock, we'll have very specific. Description tomorrow.
Among medics, the frustration is here now.
We don't feel like we have enough tests. I don't think anybody feels like they have enough tests right now.
President Trump tested for coronavirus, and a day after plenty of handshaking, an about-face.
It's sort of a natural reflex, and we're all getting out of it. All of us have that problem.
White House staff now temperature testing anyone in close contact with him, including the press corps. President Trump's test came back negative.
Was your temperature normal, Mr. President?
Tonight, though, the United States is locking down and ill at ease. Prula One, SBS World News.
Coming up next, we'll cross live to Paris for the latest on the coronavirus outbreak there. Also, is Britain's response to the pandemic putting people at risk? Also, what you need to do to improve your chances of staying healthy. And a cross-cultural show of unity and respect, a year on from New Zealand's deadliest mass shooting in modern history.
Tonight at 7:30, Secrets of Our Cities. Then at 8:30, North America with Simon Reeve. Then at 9:40, Jeff Bezos' Empire, The Rise and Reign of Amazon.
Tuesday on Inside.
I dropped a phenomenal amount of weight.
The weight came back. Why can't we keep weight off?
So what's the point of people going on diets?
We need to look at the bigger picture.
At 9:30 on Dateline.
So these are all canned goods.
Europeans prepping for a crisis.
You can't depend on the government. You have to do it yourself.
Then at 10, The Feed. Koalas that survived the bushfires now face a new threat. That's Tuesday on SBS and On Demand.
Seresto provides 8 months of protection from ticks and fleas, so your cat can enjoy 8 months of tenderness. Seresto, the longest lasting tick and flea protection for cats. For 8 months of love.
Phone detection cameras are in operation on New South Wales roads. So if you're driving and illegally handle your mobile phone, you can stop it or cop it.
G'day mate, just here to pick up my glasses.
These must be yours. Can I ask what they're all for?
Well, family time, cooking, outdoor time, and generally staying humble.
You're gonna do great, Dad.
I am a fireman.
I'm a nurse.
I'm a pilot. I'm a project manager. I manage projects. I drive a lot. When I build things, push things, I hit things, and then I carry stuff.
What do you do again?
I drive a Hilux.
Hilux Rugged X. Drive away from $62,990 and 2.9% finance for business applicants. Oh, what a feeling. Toyota.
G'day, mate. Just here to pick up my glasses.
These must be yours. Can I ask what they're all for?
Well, family time, cooking, outdoor time, and generally staying humble.
Trip back to the 70s with SBS World Movies' powerful and iconic collection of movie classics.
I don't care what you're talking about.
I'll tell you the truth.
Today's way above average for me.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
Is it safe?
70s Classics Week starts tomorrow 9:30 on SBS World Movies and On Demand.
In a new season,
Are you ready?
all new contestants will put their passions to the test.
Fashion, NBA basketball, Norse mythology.
Can you handle the spotlight?
All new Mastermind. Weeknights at 6 on SBS and On Demand.
I wish I could have been standing here 500 years ago.
Tony Robinson is going back in time.
How long would that have lasted? Up to 3 years.
Tony Robinson's History of Britain starts Wednesday 7:30 on SBS and On Demand.
There are more questions being raised over the British government's response and so-called delay phase to deal with the coronavirus, with pressure rising from a number of groups for it to take more drastic measures sooner. More than 1,140 people are now infected and the death toll has risen from 11 to 21, the largest jump in a single day.
In UK hospitals today, a harsh reality. The number of deaths doubling in a day. And inside this hospital, a baby believed to have become the world's youngest coronavirus patient, testing positive within minutes of being born.
We are continually following the evidence and scientific advice, and that has been that children seem to be less at risk compared to, older people, people with underlying health conditions.
Get set, go!
The government's yet to kick off plans such as banning mass gatherings like this. But that's expected to be introduced next week. But with estimates the real number of cases is as high as 10,000. There are growing calls for more measures to protect the public. The World Health Organization raising alarm about the country's strategy, which aims to allow enough people to be infected with the virus who then recover in order to build up so-called herd immunity. Authorities then hoping to introduce harsher measures at a time they'll be most effective.
It's all about taking the right steps at the right time, which will best respond and manage the impact of the virus, and so that we have the best possible outcomes for our population.
But hundreds of scientists have written to the government warning of a current lack of action. Some worry the UK's failure to test systematically means it could become the next Italy.
With the doubling of the number of deaths today, we are in a grave situation. We're in an exponential upward curve now, leading to large numbers of deaths. We're just a couple of weeks behind Italy, almost certainly.
The UK government response has, in my view, placed the country at a considerably higher risk of becoming the next domino to fall in the series of outbreaks that we've seen around the world.
Do you know the national anthem?
A new opinion poll finding only a little more than a third of British people trust what leader Boris Johnson says on the subject. The government has announced plans for more new ventilators and that the National Health Service will buy up beds in private hospitals to boost capacity. But for some, that just isn't yet strong enough. Christine Carney, SBS World News.
Well, things are moving fast in Europe, with countries stepping up controls to keep their citizens safe. CNN's Catherine Trent is in Paris. She joins me now live. Catherine, local elections, of course, are being held right across France today. How do you think that will work as the country shuts down?
Well, Janice, there are a great deal of questions being asked about just how this voting in these local elections is going to pass off, given the outbreak of coronavirus, which is hitting hard in France now. So the elections have not been postponed, despite numerous calls from opposition parties or even a group of doctors writing an open letter in the press saying that it's dangerous for people to go and vote. They are still going ahead. The polling stations are open now, and special measures have been put in place there. For example, example, they've all been thoroughly disinfected, the door handles, the floors and the voting booths. Voters are being asked to stand at least 1 metre 3 feet apart, and there are special markers been taped to the floor in many of the polling stations. Voters are also asked to bring their own pens to avoid the possible contact and contamination of virus through that. But there are a great deal of questions about just what effect this will have on the vote itself, what effect it's going to have on participation, whether people stay away from the polling stations, and what impact that could have on the results.
Well, tell us more about that impact, Catherine. How are people feeling about the gravity of this situation right across Europe?
I think it's really hitting home for people here in France and across Europe now with the lockdown measures we've seen coming into place. On Saturday evening, the French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe came on national TV and really surprised a lot of people by saying that just a few hours after his speech, 4 hours later, all restaurants, cafes and bars, cinemas and theatres would be closed down. Only essential stores would be kept open, those selling food and medicines. And I think until then people had been concerned about the coronavirus but not really measuring its impact on their daily lives. As of Monday, all schools, universities and kindergartens in France will be closed down too. So we're really seeing this entering another stage. And indeed, France has entered now what it calls stage 3 of its response to the virus, which means that it is actively circulating across the whole of French territory. And the hospitals and the health system here really gearing up for this to spike in the number of infections going forward.
Thanks so much. That's CNN's Catherine Trent updating us live from Paris. Well, there's no doubt the impact of the coronavirus is being felt in our daily lives. And with so many messages about what to do and what not to do, making the right choice can be difficult. But experts say the best way to protect yourself is to practice good hygiene, no matter where you are.
To help stop the spread of viruses like the flu or coronavirus,
good hygiene is what we are being told is essential to look after our health during this pandemic, and washing your hands properly is part of the equation.
Soap kills viruses by the soap molecules basically ripping the greasy layer around the virus apart.
Professor Petersen says the virus is actually quite sensitive and can be easily killed once it's on your hands. He says alcohol-based hand sanitisers can be used, but there is a key difference between the two.
It's actually easier to get the soap everywhere on your hand, and that matters too. If you miss part of your hand, it doesn't matter if you have the strongest, most expensive hand sanitizer in the world. It's not as good as grandma's soap if you can use her soap to get all over your hand. It's really more about that.
One of the biggest criticisms of the federal government has been the mixed messages around what people should and shouldn't be doing and where they can and can't go as the daily number of infections rises. Chief Medical Officer Brendan Murphy says it's okay to ride on public transport and go to the gym.
If you're going to the gym, I would be very focused on hand washing, using hand sanitisers, all of those social distancing, good hygiene measures. We want everybody in the community to start practicing those.
A message welcomed by the industry, which says it's being proactive to ensure staff and patrons follow good hygiene practices.
We've been working with the gyms to make sure that they follow out their normal hygiene and sanitising procedures, but perhaps also just step it up a little bit and instead of just doing it once a day, maybe do it twice a day. Put up signage encouraging their members to use wipes.
When it comes to shopping, though, the message about not stockpiling appears to be failing. Household goods are still being stripped from supermarket shelves. Most major supermarkets have now introduced limits on purchasing essentials to ensure ongoing supplies. Victoria's top health officer's advice to buy 2 weeks' worth of supplies may have prompted more panic buying, but the Chief Medical Officer Brendan Murphy says stocking up for a few days was most sensible.
We're generally at one on all of our advice.
Well, not
well, I mean, I think that for most people, I think we don't want to encourage major panic buying at the moment. That we've seen that with the supermarket chains, but I think it's probably sensible to have a few days of supply. Yeah.
Experts also warning people it's important not to ignore official government advice.
I am encouraging everyone to follow the directions of government. This is probably one of the few times, I understand there's a lot of cynicism about governments, but this is probably one of the few times you really do want to be listening to them.
One of the consistent messages is if you're unwell, stay away from others. Gloria Kleisch, SBS World News.
The federal opposition leader has formally responded to the Prime Minister's national address on the coronavirus. Anthony Albanese says we must listen to the advice from doctors and says more can and should be done.
Good evening. The world faces the toughest health crisis in decades, and we will face it together the Australian way. But we cannot afford complacency. We must do everything we can to treat the sick, protect the vulnerable and contain the spread of this virus. We must heed the advice of our world-class medical professionals, especially those with expertise in viruses. They have our backs. We can trust in them and their advice. There are simple things that we can all do that will make a huge difference. Keep calm and wash your hands for at least 20 seconds. Look out for each other, especially the elderly. There is a lot of misinformation out there online. Get your information from credible sources such as health.gov.au and the ABC. And please, show respect to our frontline health workers and those working in supermarkets during difficult circumstances. I do want to assure you that we approach this in a spirit of bipartisanship. We will be constructive. We will support the government to protect the health of Australians, but also to protect their jobs and our economy. We've got to approach this with open hearts, but we've also got to approach it with open eyes. As we've seen overseas, the earlier and the faster the response, the better the outcome. More can be done and should be done, including more consistent advice, such as when to self-isolate and when to get tested. Getting more people tested more quickly. The fast tracking of fever clinics. Expanding Medicare to allow people to call or Skype their GP. A serious reduction in large gatherings of people. Timely and comprehensive travel advice and restrictions that are updated much more frequently. There is now no room for delays. We want to see the government get this right because people's lives and their jobs depend on it. We want to ensure there is substance, not spin. The government has announced an economic stimulus plan designed to protect jobs and sustain economic activity. That is a good start. And now the proper and efficient rollout of that plan is absolutely critical. That also means recognising that for casual, contract and gig workers, if work stops, so does their income, and they need immediate assistance. And whilst dealing with this health crisis, we can't forget the families, businesses and communities affected so adversely by the bushfires over the summer. They simply can't afford more delays. Australians are tough and practical, and we always look out for each other. The whole country stepped up over the recent bushfires, and that's the spirit that I know will get us through this crisis. Thank you and good night.
That's Anthony Albanese. The coronavirus forced the cancellation of a memorial service for the victims of the Christchurch terror attack, but New Zealanders still found a way to honour the dead 1 year on. Locals and visitors gathered at the Al Noor Mosque where the attack started to place flowers and share their grief.
They showed up in the immediate aftermath. And once again, 12 months on, New Zealanders have united, throwing their support around the Muslim community. A traditional Maori embrace between the two Tangata Baikis and the Imam of the Al Noor Mosque.
Much appreciated, and we all feel that the country, the whole country, is standing with us.
Yeah, show a strength, show a unity, show that we're still here. It doesn't matter what religion, what colour, what creed, what nationality, what political affiliation, whatever else you can throw in there. It's 51 people here. It happened in our city.
The global health pandemic meant that a national remembrance service was called off at the last minute. But that didn't stop many people from near and far turning out at the location of the first attack 12 months ago, which saw 51 people killed.
That's the first time we've ever been inside a mosque, so going as a family and just supporting the Muslim community, really. Them explaining what actually happened on the day and how they were hiding behind things.
As private prayers were held inside the mosque, tears flowed on the streets of Christchurch as visitors to Al Noor reflected on the country's worst terror attack.
We knew quite a few members of the mosque that were actually killed during that attack. So we're good friends who have lost their family members. So it was very emotional just to think about how quickly the year has gone by, but also how much grief this community must be feeling even now, even a year on.
New Zealand's darkest day immortalised on canvas displayed in front of the mosque. And what happened here will forever be etched in the memories of Muslims around the world.
But those of us that have survived, those that are left behind, those that have an opportunity to do good, let's do our best in serving humanity. In saying that, you cannot remove these scars and the mental stress and the deep pain that many of them would feel when they put their heads on the pillows at night.
In Christchurch, Virginia Langeberg, SBS World News.
And a scaled-back service was held in Canberra to mark the Christchurch anniversary. The peace bell was rung 51 times to represent those who lost their lives. In a statement, the Prime Minister Scott Morrison said Australia stands in unity and solidarity with New Zealand on the anniversary of the horrific terrorist attacks. 3 US soldiers have been killed and several Iraqi forces wounded in a growing cycle of attacks and retaliations in Iraq. The rockets were fired as funerals were held for 5 militants killed in US airstrikes earlier this week. The American strike was in retaliation to an attack on Wednesday, which killed 2 American troops and a British soldier at the Iraqi base north of Baghdad. The Russian-Turkish ceasefire is largely holding in Idlib, Syria's last remaining rebel-held area. But for the nearly 1 million people displaced by the latest fighting, finding refuge is a daily struggle. Some have even been forced to live in graveyards.
It's playtime in Idlib. For Farah, Mara, Amal, Mohammed and Mahmoud, this means chopping up grass and weeds. But look closer and their playground becomes clearer. It's a graveyard. The grim reality doesn't end there. It's also their home for the foreseeable future. Yusra Harsouni says the only place she could find shelter was with the dead.
We escaped Ariha because of heavy bombardment. We escaped death. We've searched everywhere for shelter, but the only available space was inside the cemetery. God willing, He will help us, and after the situation gets better, we return to our homes. I don't think we can stay here longer. The girls are too scared.
Nearly 1 million people have been displaced in the last 3 months of bombardment and advances by government troops, backed by Iranian and Russian forces. Where they used to pray for the dead is now home for 65 families.
We provided shelter to the displaced families from South Idlib and West Aleppo in the mosque of Sarmada Cemetery. Most of the families came from the streets. They have nowhere to go. In case we don't find houses or tents, the families will remain here.
Northern Syria's Idlib is the last rebel stronghold. For years, people from other opposition-held areas were moved here under various political deals. As the opposition loses more ground, there's less space for the nearly 4 million people in the province. The weather is still cold, and most families lack basic supplies. People say they've been abandoned by the world yet again. To them, it feels no one cares about their suffering.
We left our home at 3 a.m. under airstrikes. We need everything: blankets, mattresses. Our small children are surviving only on water and rice. We need milk, diapers for the babies. We need you to help us. It's winter and it's so cold at night. Help us with a tent or whatever. Just take us out of here, away from dead people. At night they close the door on us, and most of the families stay awake at night because they're scared.
A ceasefire deal between Turkey and Syria has paused the fighting, at least for now. Human Rights Watch wants concerned countries to call out Russia's involvement in Syria's war crimes and tell the Kremlin to end its support of Syria's government. It says the war has taken a toll on children for 9 years, their lives forever marked by the conflict.
A Canadian woman and an Italian man kidnapped in Burkina Faso in 2018 have turned up safe in neighbouring Mali. Edith Blair and Luca Taquieto were reported to have escaped their captors before they were picked up by UN peacekeeping forces near the northern city of Kidal. The couple, who appear to be in good health, were flown to the country's capital where they met the Malian president at the presidential palace. They're now planning to return home. In Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's corruption trial has been delayed for 2 months because of the outbreak. The trial, which relates to graft cases, was due to open next week. Mr Netanyahu has denied any wrongdoing. In China's Hubei province, the first epicentre of the outbreak, a 50-day lockdown is finally starting to ease. For 3 days, the only new infections there involve people who have travelled from other regions of China.
In Hubei, people are starting to celebrate. The Chinese government says the peak of the outbreak here has passed, and the province-wide lockdown is easing. For the first time in more than 50 days, residents of Shishou County are enjoying a day out. For Lili Liu, it feels like winter is finally over.
I'm very happy today. It's a bright sunny day and the flowers blooming. The lockdown is over, so I'm taking my dog for a walk in the park.
Also relieved to walk outdoors, recovered coronavirus patients in Wuhan. Medical workers there are celebrating the closure of the city's last makeshift hospital. Daily numbers of new virus cases and deaths nationwide have dropped to single digits. But the Chinese government has been accused of rushing to declare victory to help its political image. State media are working to convince the public that life is returning to normal. But psychologists say the transition will be challenging.
People will need time to adjust. They have been inside for so long and will feel awkward both physically and mentally. Some people may react to this freedom by panicking. Some may have potential psychological problems.
Certain Hubei factories and businesses have been given permission to resume operations. Ray Tang's company is one of them. The hardware engineer is eager to return to the office. He hasn't been able to work from home and is worried about his income.
The company is definitely losing money. Of course, this affects our personal income. We don't know how we'll get paid for February.
Not all counties have lifted restrictions. Millions are still under orders to stay home. Li Jiaxu has been making the most of her time indoors with family, but is struggling to contain her excitement.
On the day that I have full freedom, I'm going to feel like an excited bird flying out of this cage.
For now, she's getting ready for her day under the sun.
As infection rates rise across Latin America, there are concerns the region isn't prepared to deal with the coronavirus. As we mentioned earlier, the pandemic has prompted Colombia to shut its land border with Venezuela, and to the thousands of Venezuelans who cross over every year looking for food and medicine they can't get at home.
For many Venezuelans, the border with Colombia is a lifeline for surviving the economic crisis in their nation. But on Saturday, Colombia's President Iván Duque announced its closure to contain the spread of COVID-19.
The border crossings with Venezuela will be closed starting at 5 a.m. It will be done as a protection measure against the situation that is also occurring in the neighbouring country.
On Friday, Venezuela confirmed 2 cases of coronavirus. But many fear that number could be higher as the country struggles with a humanitarian crisis that has left hospitals without basic supplies, including soap and hand sanitizer. Doctors in Venezuela say they're not ready to cope with a common flu, let alone a global pandemic.
Most of these hospitals are not at an acceptable standard. About 12 of the military hospitals are not qualified at all to be able to tend to patients, even with the common flu.
President Nicolás Maduro has suspended schools and banned public gatherings. He's asked people to wear a mask when using the metro in the capital, Caracas.
Sencillo. It's simple. Wear a face mask. It's an order for everyone in the next days and weeks. Better safe than sorry.
In Brazil, the government has announced $1 billion to strengthen its public healthcare system. President Jair Bolsonaro tested negative for COVID-19 on Friday. That's after his communication officer tested positive after a trip to the United States, where he met with President Donald Trump. Bolsonaro is to remain in isolation and will be tested again.
Even though the number of cases in Latin America remain relatively low, they're likely to increase in the next few weeks. And that's why governments are stepping up efforts to try to control it. In Argentina, they're controlling cruises in ports. They're also canceling flights and imposing mandatory isolations of those who travel to the United States, Europe, and China.
Schools and public events are also being cancelled as countries try to adapt to what may come ahead.
Governments around the world, including here in Australia, are promoting social distancing as one of the ways to stop the coronavirus pandemic from spreading. But health workers are urging governments to also look at the additional cost of exclusion among the most vulnerable.
The second pandemic of the 21st century has led to the largest quarantine in human history. Bustling cities have turned into ghost towns. Millions are under lockdown in parts of Asia and Europe. Public squares, where communities have been converging for centuries, are almost empty. In today's hyper-connected world, doctors and governments are urging less social contact to reduce the risk of infection. But there are concerns that social distancing, although vital in these times, can also lead to social isolation.
Intent of social distancing is in fact to protect those who are the most vulnerable, in particular the elderly and those with underlying medical conditions. It's also to try to reduce the rate of the spread of the disease so that we can avoid overwhelming the healthcare system with too many ill patients at the same time. But I certainly understand that those who are already the most vulnerable already face the greatest barriers to care and may have limited social networks. And we're asking them to limit these social networks even further.
In New York, volunteers of local charity groups like this one are working overtime to deliver food to the elderly and poor stuck at home. Those who aren't just vulnerable to the virus, but also hunger.
It's very serious, especially those who have the vulnerable conditions or pre-existing conditions. They can't get out like some of us can, like you and I. So for them, they are affected because they cannot eat, and also they're isolated.
The World Health Organization says now, more than ever, communities must come together and stand with those neglected by society.
When we speak about that vulnerability, we cannot forget migrants. We cannot forget undocumented workers. We cannot forget prisoners in prisons. They may be serving sentence, but they deserve no less protection under the law than others. So when we talk about stigma, we also need to really look carefully at exclusion.
Voices of hope. Chants of solidarity. Spontaneous and resilient also show how in these trying times, people are finding new ways to break the barriers of isolation and loneliness.
Well, coming up next, silver linings. The sector booming as the coronavirus pandemic worsens. And catastrophic, a dire warning from rugby league administrators.
How is it that you convinced tens of millions of people to put what is essentially a listening device in their homes?
For 25 years, Jeff Bezos has been disrupting and transforming every aspect of our modern lives.
Domination was on Jeff's mind from the beginning.
But what is the true cost of progress and lower-priced goods?
This is how they treat us. This is not right.
The Jeff Bezos Empire, The Rise and Reign of Amazon, starts tonight 9:40 on SBS and on demand.
This week, it's the grand final of Celebrity Mastermind.
4 great minds remain. But which celebrity will champion the swivelly chair? Celebrity Mastermind, Saturday 7:30 on SBS and on demand.
Imagine if every bank stopped funding the fossil fuel industry, live animal exports, and weapons. Where you bank can change the world.
GoDaddy Websites Plus Marketing. Plus is building a mobile-friendly website to get your business or idea online. Plus is GoDaddy Websites Plus Marketing Plus Help Plus Online Store Plus Email Campaigns Plus SEO Plus Insight. Start for free at godaddy.com/au.
Lemons, just enough zest. Chilies, right amount of heat. And the most delicate piece of tuna. Only the best ingredients make the cut. It's what John West rejects that makes John West Deli Tuna the best.
This is how legends are made.
The legendary Toyota Supra is back. Experience the exhilaration for yourself.
This is how
Oh, what a feeling. Toyota.
Joe Hisaishi, Dream Songs, the Essential Collection. With music from the classic Studio Ghibli films, Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, Howl's Moving Castle, and much more. Joe Hisaishi, Dream Songs, out now.
I am the breath of anticipation, the chill down your spine. I am the knowing smile. I am a wolf in sheep's clothing, the hero and the villain. I am your next obsession.
So some breaking news now, and it's been confirmed that a 77-year-old woman from Queensland has died from coronavirus. Officials say she died in New South Wales on Friday. Businesses and stock markets globally are struggling to stay afloat with the rapid spread of coronavirus, but some tech companies are seeing a boost in revenue as millions of people turn to digital means to continue daily life.
The COVID-19 outbreak has infected more than 140,000 people worldwide. It's forcing communities to brace for huge economic and social changes.
Hey, how you doing?
For many, staying at home may mean still getting work done, communicating with loved ones, or perhaps becoming more tech-savvy. And while businesses and stock markets forecast slow economic growth, some tech companies are seeing an uptick. Video conferencing software company Zoom is one of the biggest winners from the crisis. Removing time limits for its video chats is looking to help keep business meetings and student learning afloat. Google and Microsoft also announced they would give free access to video conferencing services and live document collaboration.
1, 2, 3, leg 2, 3.
And Google's parent company, Alphabet, says it'll work with US health officials on creating a tool to help detect the coronavirus.
Clients and patients and people of interest can go, fill out a screening questionnaire, move down for symptoms or risk factors.
Demand for messaging, education and productivity apps are likely to grow. And as more people stay at home, other platforms are benefiting.
The coronavirus will have an impact on streaming websites and services like YouTube, Hulu, and Netflix. Sites that monetize their content will see significant increases in ad revenue from increased demand on their platforms.
But as the global demand for such services increases, so does the need for secure accessibility.
The need for broadband internet access has never been more urgent. Folks who lack reliable and affordable connections will be left further behind. People need to be in control, not less secure. In the longer term, we need better build out of fiber optic networks to low-income, rural, and at-risk communities. We need discounted devices, and we need freed up use of spectrum and more alternatives like community networking.
During these times of uncertainty, digital tools are proving to be more vital than ever as the shift to home office and schooling becomes the new reality for many around the world.
Tom Hanks and his wife Rita Wilson have not passed the new coronavirus on to any cast and crew on the Gold Coast set of Baz Luhrmann's Elvis biopic, which has since delayed production. 63-year-old Mr Hanks is set to play the music icon's manager in the film. The couple tested positive to the virus on Thursday, but have since told the public they are feeling better and making a recovery. Time now for the day in sport with Darren Mara. And Darren, coronavirus could put an end to the A-League season.
That's right, it's not looking good, Janice. Football Federation Australia is considering suspending the competition after new measures were introduced by the federal government today. Wellington Phoenix defeated Melbourne Victory this afternoon, but it's the last game the two teams will play for a fortnight. Both sides will need to self-isolate for 14 days after arriving in Australia. Now, it's believed the Phoenix will relocate to Australia in order to finish the season. FFA is expected to make a decision on the competition's future tomorrow. While Melbourne City secured a spot in the W League Grand Final after demolishing the Wanderers this afternoon. Claire Emsley opened the scoring after just 13 minutes and City never looked back. Kai Simon grabbed goals either side of half-time in the 5-goal rout. City now faces Sydney FC in the Grand Final next weekend. It's the third time the sides have met in the decider. Well, the NRL is asking for federal government assistance with fears new coronavirus measures will be catastrophic for the league. The sports governing body today confirmed the competition will continue, but that could change as the pandemic unfolds.
An unprecedented crisis for rugby league. The NRL issuing a plea for financial assistance to the federal government should the season be suspended due to coronavirus.
It could have catastrophic effects on us moving forward. Our money will only last so long, and once it's extinguished, we are in big trouble.
The NRL season kicked off amid wholesale cancellations and suspensions of sporting events around the world. Rugby League Commission Chief Peter V'landys confirming the season will continue after the New Zealand Warriors agreed to stay in Australia and relocate to the Gold Coast for round 2.
We are going to review all options, including isolating players, including suspending the season.
Rabbitohs coach Wayne Bennett says the NRL needs a plan B, such as sending all 16 teams to an isolated location to continue the season.
Quarantine us all. Send us away, the whole 16 teams, and do everything we possibly can to make sure that nobody tests positive. Make sure we're all tested before we leave and go into the north somewhere where the climate's hotter.
The Rugby League Commission fearing a prolonged shutdown will put the entire league in jeopardy.
An Australia without rugby league is not Australia. The government has to assist us in this crisis because it's not of our own doing.
The NRL has already acted by allocating each club $425,000 from its distressed fund. Abby Dinham, SBS World News.
Well, precautions were of course taken at today's match between Manly and Melbourne, with balls being disinfected, as you see there. The Storm got their season off to a winning start. Suliasi Vunivalu scored 2 tries in quick succession to put Melbourne in control. After the full-time siren, Storm captain Cameron Smith suggested the league should take a short break to consider the way forward.
But, I think if we make a decision to suspend the comp for a couple of weeks, then I think it just gives everyone an opportunity to actually sum up the situation a little bit better rather than being reactive daily or hourly.
Craig Bellamy's side hasn't lost a round 1 game since 2001. Well, Super Rugby will be suspended indefinitely in the wake of strict new quarantine rules in New Zealand. The final match of the round was played out between the Brumbies and the Waratahs this afternoon, the ACT getting the better of their countrymen in the nation's capital. Though it's uncertain how useful the points will be, the suspension leaves the transcontinental tournament in limbo with only 7 of 18 rounds played. And finally in sport, the Perth Wildcats are 1 win away from securing a record-extending 10th NBL championship. The Wildcats took a 2-1 lead into the grand final series after defeating the Kings in front of a near-empty crowd in Sydney this afternoon.
The Kings got a taste of a so-called home court advantage. Game 3 in Sydney. This time the Cats seem to revel in the occasion.
Way to start, Nick Kay.
Andrew Bogut's opposite number, Miles Plumley, was making a statement.
He's having an impact early.
Plumley was damaging at both ends, helping the visitors to an 11-point lead at quarter time.
The jam! Miles Plumley making a statement early.
The defending champions turned to Bryce Cotton after the break.
My goodness! You better get a timeout.
The lead stretching to 16 points before Brad Newley provided a lifeline for the Kings. Cotton had 16 by half-time, Perth up by 10.
Cotton! A little bit of cotton candy to Casper.
Kevin Lish recaptured some of his Game 2 form, helping pull the Kings level.
One on cue.
Nick Kay stepped up again to swing the momentum.
You can't leave him free. He's too good.
The bench added some muscle late in the quarter. The Wildcats back in control, leading by 14 at the final break. The Kings rallied. Casper Ware found the right gear after a tough night.
Glass and finally get some luck, Casper Ware.
But yet again, Perth answered the challenge, closing out a critical 15-point win. Brett Clancy, SBS World News.
And that is the Dance Sport, Janice.
Thank you so much, Darren. Coming up, the weather details, and the doors are closed due to coronavirus, but this Italian museum has found a way to connect people with art.
Next, Secrets of Our Cities. Then at 8:30, North America with Simon Reeve. Then at 9:40, Jeff Bezos' Empire, The Rise and Reign of Amazon.
I wish I could have been standing here 500 years ago.
Tony Robinson is going back in time.
How long would that have lasted?
Up to 3 years. Tony Robinson's History of Britain starts Wednesday 7:30 on SBS and on demand.
How good is this? No one for miles.
Any luck, boys?
Still fit. I'd go down.
Metre wheelie bin fight. The
Council flings it to front. Our man's gonna win. Gold for Australia.
Over southern Australia, Victoria and Tasmania. Let's see what's happening in the major centres. Partly cloudy skies in Adelaide, Brisbane, Canberra and Hobart. A possible shower ahead in Perth. Sunny skies in Melbourne, a shower or two in Sydney. Looking further afield, a few showers in Wellington, overcast in Christchurch, thunder in Nundy and showers in Tahiti. In Southeast Asia, thunderstorms in Bangkok, a few showers in Jakarta, sunny in Phnom Penh and thunder in Singapore. Let's head further north. Sunny skies in Beijing, partly cloudy in Hong Kong, rain in Manila, overcast in Tokyo. Heading west, sunny skies for Beirut, foggy in Delhi and partly cloudy in Islamabad and Tehran. To Europe now, partly cloudy skies in Berlin, a few showers in London, drizzle in Paris, fog in Rome. To Africa, rain on the way for Addis Ababa, showers in Casablanca, sunny skies in Dakar, thunder in Johannesburg. To South America, partly cloudy in Buenos Aires, showers in Caracas, rain on the way for La Paz, partly cloudy in Rio. And for North America, cloudy skies in New York, rain ahead in Los Angeles, sunny in Vancouver and partly cloudy in Havana. As one of Italy's cultural landmarks, the Uffizi Gallery is used to heavy traffic. But now the grand building is empty with no visitors expected for the foreseeable future due to coronavirus. Art and history buffs, however, can take a virtual tour from home. Via Facebook, the gallery has made exhibits available online and almost 400,000 people have already taken up the initiative. Recapping our top stories now. From midnight, all arrivals in the country must self-isolate in a bid to contain the virus spread. Schools and universities will remain open for now, and a Queensland woman has become the fourth COVID-19 fatality in Australia. Around the globe, unprecedented measures are in place to stop the spread of the virus, with border closures across Latin America, Europe and Asia. US President Donald Trump's closure of the border to Europe, Britain and Ireland has seen travellers inundate airports around the country. And British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has come under fire for his government's response to COVID-19 after the virus death toll doubled in a day. That's the world this Sunday. If you missed some of tonight's bulletin, you can catch up on the SBS News website shortly. And a reminder, you can also watch the bulletin live there from our app. From all the team here, good night.